Mary, great topic for you today.
Yes.
Are you a financial failure if you don't own a home?
Yes, and that came out of a few times back with you. Somebody texted in and said, hey, what about people who are renting? Because we do tend to talk too much about mortgages and buying homes and all of that. And I think that in New Zealand there's far too much emphasis put on the importance of owning your own home. You can do really well without ever owning a home. So there was one survey recently by One Choice that found half of the people who don't currently own a home are not even somewhat confident about that they will ever be able to own their own home. But I don't think that necessarily matters. I think, that lots of people in countries, especially in Europe, that we hear about, Germany and Switzerland and some other countries where, sometimes half the people rent for life. And apparently the laws favour tenants much more there. It's sort of more of a whole way of life, and people move into an apartment and know they're going to be there for 30 years, and so they paint the walls and all of that stuff. But that might be coming to New Zealand more, I think.
You've heard some quite positive stories about the increase in long-term rentals.
Yes.
Places being built especially for long-term renters.
That's right.
Yeah.
The build-to-rent sort of current phase of things. Yes, it's another survey by Consumer New Zealand found that more than a quarter of the people who are currently tenants weren't. There were 2/3 doing it because they can't afford to buy, but more than a quarter were doing it because it suits my lifestyle right now, and that's a point. It's perfectly legitimate to say I would rather be renting. Now, obviously, the big downside is if you get to retirement and you haven't got accommodation, then you are going to need a lot more retirement savings. And so that's the key to making this all work.
Yes, quite appealing
well.
when you hit 65 and you don't have to worry about that big chunk going out on rent each week, right?
That's right.
Then you have a bit more flexibility over what you spend.
Definitely. If you've got a mortgage-free home at retirement, which fewer and fewer New Zealanders have got, although still, I think it's still a majority. But
you might still struggle with rates, of course, but
yes.
not quite the same as renting.
No, and you can get rates postponement, which we've talked about before, and there are, and you can get reverse mortgages, etc., etc. There are ways around it. But the point for people who aren't in a position right now to buy a home and are perhaps getting a bit depressed about it all, the key is to just save really hard, and then perhaps with a mindset that you might never own, so that you've got a decent chunk of money at retirement age to cover your accommodation from then on in. And if you're saving in a big way in the meantime, then you've got a nice sum building up. And if the housing market starts looking more favourable, or you change your mind, perhaps as you have children you might change your mind, then you've got a decent lump sum to make that down payment on the house, make the deposit on the house. But what I say to people, they say, well, how much do I need to save extra? And I say, look, talk to one of your friends who owns a home and of the sort of standard that you're used to living in, perhaps. Ask them what they spend on mortgage interest, not mortgage repayments, because that's a whole separate, that's a saving. But on mortgage interest, insurance, rates, maintenance, those are all things that are just expenses that come through for the homeowner. If you can save as much as your friend spends on those sort of items, then you're quite likely to end up just as well off at retirement. Some people might say, oh, look, I don't know, I don't have a friend who owns a home and I can't work out all that. The point is just save a lot of money. Set up regular savings amounts for yourself and you'll do fine with it. I would suggest you save in a higher risk fund, in or out of KiwiSaver, depending on whether you want to get access to the money at times, but higher risk funds until you're getting within sort of 8 or 10 years of spending the money, because you're likely to get higher long-term returns that way. But yeah, and another point about is renting for life as opposed to being a homeowner is that you're much more diversified.
Yeah.
If you're saving in a fund, you've got investments in shares and probably some
Well,
bonds.
if you own a home, you've
um,
invested $1 million in the Auckland property market,
that's
right? For
right.
better or for worse,
Yes,
or wherever you happen to
absolutely.
live.
It's very undiversified.
Yeah.
And that's where, of course, KiwiSaver helps,
Yeah.
but still. Looking at the negatives of renting, because there obviously are some, and I would say the biggest issue is that you can get kicked out by a landlord, and not necessarily because you were not paying the rent or you were treating the property badly. But as we were just saying a minute ago, there are more long-term leases around, and it feels to me like the laws are changing a little bit in the favour of tenants over the years. The healthy home standards are a big thing these days now. Landlords aren't allowed to have damp houses and drafty houses and so on. And it's harder for landlords to kick you out when they just, on a whim or for whatever reason. It's harder for that to happen anymore.
Yeah, I think landlords would say in New Zealand the things are stacked in favour of the tenants. I suppose they'd
Yes.
always say that, but
Yes.
they'll probably be able to make a pretty good case, probably.
Yeah, I think it's the trend has moved that way. But having said that, I think that we would probably find that in places like Switzerland and Germany, they're far more in favour of the tenants, apparently.
Well, getting to
But
paint the walls is pretty good, isn't it?
yes, and being able to do what you want in a place because you're going to be there for a long, long time.
And probably the
Yeah.
notice that they would be required to give before booting someone out as well.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know, but I think so. Yeah. Another trend in recent years, there are more properties available because landlords who are doing Airbnb and so on are finding that they're not getting enough customers, so they're moving into the longer term renting out, and they're not wanting to sell because prices have gone down, and so there are more rental properties available on the market now. So I think the pendulum swung a bit more in favour of tenants in terms of rents and in terms of how hard it is to get a property. That won't necessarily stay that way, of course. That can
it swings a bit, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It does swing around. Other negatives of being a long-term renter are that you don't get to choose what colour the paint is in most cases. You might with the landlord if they're talking about painting the kitchen or something.
Or you might, if you had guaranteed sort of long-term, decide it was worth it anyway, right?
Yes.
Just to paint it and
that's
see what
right.
happens, yeah.
Yeah, and similarly with carpets and so on. Gardens are quite a big issue. A lot of New Zealanders love gardening, and if you're a tenant, you might not feel it's worthwhile putting a lot of energy into setting up a garden. You can talk to your landlord and say, hey, you going to let me be here for the next 5 or 10 years, in which case I will get in and plant some carrots or something.
Yeah.
But, and
Or a lemon tree.
yes, even for the gin and tonics. Yeah. Some people enjoy doing DIY too, painting the place or building a deck or something like that. And of course, that's not as feasible when you're renting. There's no home for your family to come back to, and that's something people sometimes say to me, that they really want to own a home, especially if they've got kids, and they have that be a kind of family base that can go on into when the children are grown. It can still be the family home, or the place for the kids to inherit. And that is a legitimate argument, but having said that, a lot of people in their older age move out of the family home anyway. But and you miss out on the pride of ownership, and it's we can't deny that quite a lot of people get quite a lot of positive vibes just out of owning a home.
I mean, even just the narratives on TV, all those ads where there's a young couple putting a sold sign on their on the hustings outside, the high fives, you've done it, you've got there. It's our whole really social fabric is geared towards this is what you're aiming for.
Yes,
this is
it
success.
is.
This is adulthood.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of older parents of adult children encourage that for them. My son or daughter hasn't made it until they've bought themselves a home. And I would suggest that parents back off from saying that, because it isn't necessarily the best thing for their children to be doing.
And actually, over the next few years, as people of that generation look around and find none of their friends have got homes either, it will, I guess, start to feel a bit more normal than it did for maybe Gen X coming through.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. It's and on the positive side, you don't have to worry about maintenance as long as you've got a good landlord. You know, it's not like when you're a homeowner. Well, you know, most of us, I think you own your home, don't you, Jessie?
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
And you know, you start to sort of think, oh gosh, it looks a little bit like that something or other might need replacing soon. And you know, there's always kind of nagging worries about maintenance.
It's the front gate at our house at the moment. And where do you hire someone to do a front gate
Yes.
who isn't going to charge you for days and days and days of work? Yeah.
At least that's not, you know, if that falls over, you still got your roof. But it's nice to be a tenant and be able to, especially if you've got a decent landlord, be able to call them up and say something's leaking.
True.
Yes. I think it's probably easier to live close to the CBD if that's what you want to do when you're renting, although that doesn't apply as much anymore because there's more apartments selling near the city now. But and you can move a lot more easily, and that's quite a big plus at all sorts of different stages in your life.
When you're renting, you can.
Yes. You might want to try living in the country or living out of town at a beach for a while or something like that, and you can. It's easy enough to give that a whirl when you're a tenant, whereas when you're a homeowner and going overseas, of course, that's all sort of a lot less complicated if you don't own a home.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, you're talking about the lifestyle factors. This person on text says, I'm a landlord of a one-bedroom unit and a tenant of a two-bedroom half house, which suits me now. And I'll most likely live in my one-bedroom unit when I get much older. So I appreciate the issues for tenants and landlords.
Yes.
But they're making the choice that renting is right for them at the moment.
Yes, and yes, indeed. And in fact, I write about that in my book, Rich Enough, the landlord tenants or tenant landlords. Yes, there are people around who, for all kinds of reasons, are doing that, getting into the housing market, but not for the place they live in. Yes, yeah. The other thing, of course, is the affordability of housing. There's been quite a bit written lately about how house prices, well, they've certainly fallen from they went to a rather silly peak in 2021, have come down, and forecasts now are getting a lot more subdued for future house price rises. I think there was a story on the RNZ website recently that said something like, after you adjust for inflation, house prices might not go up much at all for the next, 5 years or so.
Yeah.
So, the affordability is certainly getting better, although it's still, from the 1950s to the 80s, the average house price was 2 or 3 times average household income. And it's gone way up. It went way up to 10 times household income in December 2021, having fluctuated a bit, but it's coming back down now. And I've said this to you many times, I just don't think that works long term for houses to cost that much of a multiple of people's incomes.
No, you said it doesn't add up and it can't last.
Yes, that's right. So, but I mean, I haven't got a magic wand about that, but I just think that people who are saying, okay, I'm going to sit on the sidelines for a while and save lots of money, but not bother about owning a home, and they might well find that in 5 or 10 years, relative to their income, house prices are not nearly as high as they are now.
Actually, I just spoke to a guy yesterday. They've been he and his wife have been looking for a house for ages. They've been trying to buy for a year, and they finally got the place. And he said, actually, I'm really glad that we bought it now and not a year ago.
Yeah.
It actually has benefited them, the fact that they got outbid.
And who would have thought that a few years back when every year it was climbing
The message
fast
was, get in there as soon as you can.
Yes.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I think, people who are buying houses are in a position to negotiate quite hard, really, because there aren't that many buyers out there. But having said all that, I think people who are renting don't need to get depressed by it. Just keep saving a good steady amount coming regularly out of your income. Yeah, setting it aside. So...
Okay, 2 texts for you. One, hi Jessie and Mary. In the Netherlands, a lot of people rent, but they rent homes that are the property of a governing body, like the council.
Yes.
They stay in these rentals for their whole lives, but once their children have left home, they are encouraged to move to something smaller also owned by the council. That's Monique Van Nistelrooy. Sounds like a good Netherlands name.
No, that's interesting. Yeah.
And then this one, is Mary the one that pops up on Facebook wanting me to join her investment group, or is that a scammer? If it's a scammer, what is she doing about it?
Did that just come in? Yeah, because that has came up about a week ago, that it's a scam, to get straight to the point. And there was a lot on
Very
Facebook.
distressing for you, Mary.
It was awful, because they were suggesting, and they used real photos of me that they'd stolen off other websites. And the writing was in my sort of style. And I think AI probably took my column and wrote this sort of promo in the kind of way I write.
And for the first half of it, probably would be sort of the things you would say anyway.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And it's just the twist at the end when they say.
Yeah, what sort of and one of the giveaways was when they said, what sort of returns are you looking for? And the options were 10 to 20%, 20 to 30%, or 30 to 45%. And actually, well, no, I'm never going to be suggesting to anybody that you're likely to even get the 10 to 20%. That's aiming too high. But I feel sick because I don't know who might have invested in that, thinking that I was behind it. I just hope nobody has. We're doing stuff about it, and actually through the Herald got the name of someone at Meta in Sydney, and they've been trying to sort of shut things down, but it's not that easy.
Well, it's a bit of whack-a-mole, isn't it?
Yeah,
And,
it is.
yeah.
It is. So please, everybody, tell everybody else you know that it's not me, and please don't invest in there, because even people have said to me, don't worry, Mary, you're not losing money. But if people are investing because they think it's got my stamp of approval on it, that I sort of feel responsible for that, and I hate it. It's horrible.
Thank you for setting the record straight. Great to see you again.
Thanks, Jess.
You can find all Mary's chats, interviews on our podcasts page.